My name is Maya Chen, and at exactly 5:17 a.m. on March 30th, I watched my mother shred my Harvard acceptance letter into tiny pieces before tossing it into the kitchen garbage disposal. The sound of the motor grinding up 4 years of my dreams still haunts me. What she didn't know was that I had already photographed every single acceptance letter the night before, and by evening Harvard would be calling our house directly. If you think you know how this story ends, trust me, you don't. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light was just beginning to creep through our Scottsdale kitchen windows when I heard my mother's footsteps padding across the tile floor. I had been awake since 4 a.m., too anxious to sleep, knowing that today was the day I planned to tell my parents about my college acceptances. 7 letters had arrived over the past 2 weeks, each one more incredible than the last. Harvard, Stanford, MIT, UC Berkeley, and 3 others. My SAT scores of 1580, my 4.0 GPA, and countless hours of volunteer work at the local community health clinic had paid off beyond my wildest dreams. I had hidden the acceptance letters in my bedroom, planning to present them to my parents over breakfast as a surprise. The full-ride scholarship to Harvard was particularly meaningful to me because it meant I wouldn't need to touch the college fund my parents had been building since I was 5. That money could stay exactly where it was, a testament to their sacrifice and my academic achievement working in perfect harmony. But as I crept downstairs that morning, I discovered my mother Linda already at the kitchen counter, holding every single one of my acceptance letters. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I realized with growing horror that she must have been searching through my things while I slept. The expression on her face wasn't pride or excitement, it was something much darker. "Maya," she said without turning around, her voice carrying that particular tone that had terrified me since childhood. "Come here, we need to discuss your little secret." My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached. She spread the letters across the granite countertop like evidence of a crime. The Harvard letterhead gleamed in the early morning light, official and magnificent. The Stanford seal looked equally impressive. MIT's acceptance letter was accompanied by additional materials about their pre-med program. All of it represented years of sacrifice, late nights studying, and dreams of becoming a doctor who could serve underserved communities. "Mom, I can explain," I began, but she held up her hand to silence me. "Explain what? How you've been lying to this family for months. How you've been planning to abandon everything we've built here in Phoenix. How you think you're too good for Arizona State University like your brother Jason." The comparison to Jason stung immediately. My older brother had graduated from ASU 3 years earlier with a business degree that took him 6 years to complete. His GPA had hovered around 2.8, and he'd spent most of college partying at fraternity events and working part-time at our family's electronics store. Yet somehow he had become the golden child, the practical one who understood family loyalty and business sense. "This isn't about Jason," I said quietly, "this is about my future. These schools are offering me opportunities. My mother's voice rose sharp enough to wake the entire neighborhood. "What opportunities? To spend 4 years in Massachusetts surrounded by people who will never accept you? To forget where you came from? To turn your back on the family business that put food on this table and paid for your expensive private tutoring?" Chen Electronics had indeed been good to our family. What started as my father's single computer repair shop in a Phoenix strip mall had grown into 8 locations across the metro areas. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable, and I had never taken that for granted. My parents had immigrated from Taiwan when I was 2 years old, and they had built something substantial from nothing, but their vision of my future and mine had never aligned. They wanted me to study business at Arizona State, graduate, and take over operations of the growing Chen Electronics empire. I wanted to become a doctor, to use my aptitude for science and mathematics to help people who couldn't afford quality healthcare. We had been having versions of this argument for 2 years. I'm not turning my back on anything, I insisted. The Harvard acceptance comes with a full scholarship. It won't cost you a penny. And after medical school, I could come back to Phoenix and open a practice. I could serve our community better with an MD than with a business degree. My mother laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Medical school? Maya, you're living in a fantasy world. Do you know what medical school costs? Do you know how many years that takes? By the time you're finished playing doctor, you'll be 30 years old with hundreds of thousands in debt, and for what? To work in some hospital where they'll never promote you because of how you look. The comment about how I looked hit like a physical blow. Throughout high school, I had dealt with subtle and not so subtle discrimination, but I had hoped my parents would be the ones believing in my potential regardless of the obstacles I might face. That's not true, I said, though my voice wavered. Things are changing. There are more Asian American doctors now than ever before. And besides, I'm not doing this for recognition, I'm doing it because I want to help people. Help people, my mother repeated mockingly. You want to help people, help your family, help the business that gave you everything. Jason understands this, why can't you? There it was again, Jason, who had never earned above a B+ in any science class, who had failed calculus twice, who spent his college years learning the bare minimum required to graduate. Jason, who now worked as operations manager at Chen Electronics and lived in a condo 15 minutes from our house. Jason, who had never once challenged our parents' expectations or expressed any desire to build something beyond what already existed. Jason and I are different people, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. We have different talents, different dreams. That doesn't mean either of us is wrong. Different dreams, my mother said, picking up the Harvard letter and examining it as if it were contaminated. Let me tell you about dreams, Maya. Your father and I dreamed of building something permanent in this country. We dreamed of giving our children stability and opportunity. We didn't dream of watching our daughter disappear into some East Coast elite world where she'll spend 4 years learning to be ashamed of her family. I could never be ashamed of you, I said, tears beginning to blur my vision. You raised me to work hard, to excel, to reach for the highest goals. These acceptance letters are proof that your values worked. This is what success looks like. But even as I spoke, I could see that my words weren't reaching her. Something had hardened in my mother's expression, a decision crystallizing behind her eyes that filled me with dread. Success, she said slowly, looks like loyalty. Success looks like understanding where you belong. Success looks like respecting the sacrifices your parents made instead of spitting on them. She moved toward the kitchen sink, and I watched in growing horror as she held the Harvard acceptance letter over the garbage disposal. Mom, please, I whispered. Don't do this. Let's talk to Dad. Let's discuss this as a family. There has to be a way to make this work. Your father agrees with me, she said firmly. We discussed this possibility months ago when you were filling out applications behind our backs. We agreed that if any of these fancy East Coast schools tried to steal you away from your family, we would handle it decisively. You knew about the applications. Of course we knew. Did you think you could hide SAT prep books, application essays, and letters of recommendation requests from us? We're not stupid, Maya. We were just hoping you'd come to your senses before it got this far. The revelation hit me like cold water. They had known about everything. They had watched me pour my heart into essays about my aspirations, my commitment to serving others, my gratitude for their sacrifices. They had seen me stay up until 2 a.m. perfecting personal statements and preparing for interviews. And they had been planning to sabotage it all along. Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. If you knew how much this
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Meant to me, why would you want to destroy it? Because sometimes parents have to protect their children from their own poor judgment, my mother replied. Because sometimes love means saying no to things that seem good but will ultimately hurt you. Because I would rather have a daughter who resents me temporarily than lose a daughter permanently to a world that will never truly accept her. She flipped the switch, and the garbage disposal roared to life. The Harvard letter disappeared into the grinding mechanism, followed quickly by Stanford, MIT, and UC Berkeley. 4 years of work, countless sacrifices, the validation of every teacher who had ever believed in me, all of it destroyed in less than 30. I stood frozen, unable to move or speak as my mother systematically fed each acceptance letter into the disposal. The sound was mechanical and final, like a door slamming shut on every possibility I had ever imagined for myself. When the disposal finally fell silent, my mother turned to face me with an expression that might have been satisfaction or might have been regret. It was impossible to tell. Now, she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel as if she had just finished preparing breakfast, you can focus on what really matters. Your AAU application is still pending, and your father has already spoken to the dean of the business school about your interest in their program. With your grades, you'll qualify for in-state academic scholarships, and you can continue living at home while you study. It's a much more sensible plan. Sensible, I repeated numbly. The word felt foreign in my mouth, like a language I had once known but could no longer speak. Yes, sensible, practical, realistic. All the things your generation seems to have forgotten in favor of chasing impossible dreams. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that destroying my acceptance letters wouldn't destroy my determination, that Harvard would still have my acceptance on file, that this act of sabotage was futile and cruel. Instead, I found myself backing toward the stairs, my legs unsteady beneath me. Where are you going? My mother asked. To get ready for school, I managed to say. Good. And Maya, we're not going to discuss this with your father or Jason. This conversation stays between us. There's no need to upset the family with something that's already been resolved. I nodded, though I had no intention of keeping her secret. As I climbed the stairs to my room, my mind was already racing with plans. The letters were destroyed, but the acceptances were real. Harvard's admissions office would have records. Financial aid documentation existed. This wasn't over just because my mother had decided it was. In my bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it, trying to process what had just happened. 4 months of waiting, of hoping, of imagining my future had been erased in 5 minutes by someone who claimed to love me. The betrayal felt deeper than simple disappointment. It felt like a fundamental violation of trust between parent and child. But as I sat on my bed, staring at the empty space on my desk where the acceptance letters had been hidden, I realized something important. My mother had destroyed the physical letters, but she hadn't destroyed my acceptance to those schools. She had acted out of fear and control, but she hadn't actually changed the reality of what I had accomplished. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to Harvard's admissions office, explaining that my original acceptance materials had been damaged and requesting confirmation of my acceptance status. If they were willing to work with me, if the scholarship offer was still valid, then this morning's destruction would be nothing more than a temporary setback. My mother thought she had ended my dreams, but she had only strengthened my resolve. By evening, she would learn just how wrong she had been about what her daughter was capable of achieving. Parts 2, 5. The Foundation of Betrayal. The rest of that morning passed in a haze of forced normalcy. I went through the motions of getting ready for school, mechanically brushing my teeth and choosing clothes while my mind churned with plans and possibilities. When I came downstairs for breakfast, my mother was humming quietly as she prepared scrambled eggs and toast, as if she hadn't just destroyed the most important documents of my life 30 minutes earlier. My father Robert sat at the kitchen table reading the Arizona Republic on his tablet, occasionally glancing up to comment on stock prices or local business news. He looked completely relaxed, unaware of the morning's devastation. Either my mother hadn't told him about the letters yet, or he was an even better actor than I had given him credit for. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said as I entered the kitchen, ready for another day at Desert Ridge High. I managed a weak smile and nodded, not trusting my voice. My throat still felt raw from the shock and tears I had swallowed upstairs. The casual normalcy of the scene felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's family through a window. Maya looks tired, my mother observed, setting a plate of eggs in front of me. Maybe you should go to bed earlier instead of staying up all night reading those science journals. The comment stung because it was partially true. I had been staying up late, but not just reading journals. I had been researching pre-med programs, comparing course requirements, and imagining myself in lecture halls at Harvard Medical School. All of that felt impossibly distant now. I'm fine, I said quietly, pushing the eggs around on my plate without eating. You need to eat, my father said, lowering his tablet to look at me more closely. Your mother made your favorite breakfast. The kindness in his voice almost broke my composure entirely. How could he be so gentle and caring while simultaneously supporting the destruction of my dreams? How could both of my parents claim to love me while working so systematically to limit my future? I forced myself to take a few bites, knowing that refusing to eat would only invite more questions and attention. The eggs tasted like cardboard, but I chewed and swallowed mechanically while my parents continued their morning routine around me. Jason wandered into the kitchen 20 minutes later, his hair still messy from sleep. At 25, he still lived at home, claiming it was a smart financial decision that allowed him to save money while helping with the family business. Our parents praised this choice as mature and responsible, though I suspected it had more to do with convenience than wisdom. Morning family, he said cheerfully, grabbing a piece of toast from the counter. Dad, did you see the quarterly reports from the Tempe location? Revenue is up 18% from last year. My father's face lit up with pride. That's excellent news. Your new inventory management system is really paying off. I listened to them discuss profit margins and customer satisfaction scores while finishing my breakfast. This was the world my parents wanted me to join permanently. Not that there was anything wrong with retail electronics, but it felt like wearing clothes that were 3 sizes too small. The business discussions that energized Jason left me feeling claustrophobic and restless. Maya, you should come by the store after school today, Jason suggested, turning to include me in the conversation. I could show you the new point-of-sale system we're implementing across all locations. It's pretty sophisticated stuff. I have academic decathlon practice after school, I replied automatically. Academic decathlon, Jason repeated with a slight smirk, still doing the quiz bowl thing. When are you going to focus on learning skills that actually matter in the real world? The dismissive tone in his voice was familiar but still painful. Jason had never understood my academic interests, and our parents had never encouraged him to respect them. While I spent weekends at science fairs and math competitions, he was learning practical business skills that our parents viewed as infinitely more valuable. Knowledge always matters, I said perhaps a bit too sharply. Sure, but you can't eat knowledge, Jason replied. You can't pay rent with perfect SAT scores. You can't build a business empire with academic awards. Jason, my father said mildly, but there was approval in his tone. Be nice to your sister. I am being nice. I'm trying to help her understand reality before it's too late. Reality. The word echoed my mother's earlier comments about practical choices and sensible plans. In my family's version of reality, ambition beyond our immediate circumstances was viewed as dangerous delusion. Safety lay in staying close to home, both geographically and professionally. I excused myself from the table and gathered my school backpack, checking to make sure my laptop was inside. I had research to do during lunch period, phone calls to make, and plans to formulate. My parents might have destroyed the physical letters, but they hadn't destroyed my determination. The drive to Desert Ridge High took 15 minutes through suburban Phoenix neighborhoods lined with palm trees and red tile roofs. I had made this journey hundreds of times over the past 4 years, but this morning it felt different. Every familiar landmark reminded me that this might be the extent of my world, if I couldn't find a way to resurrect my college plans. Desert Ridge High was a sprawling campus of beige stucco buildings connected by covered walkways, designed to provide shade during Arizona's brutal summer months. With over 3,000 students, it was large enough to offer excellent academic programs, but impersonal enough that individual achievement often went unnoticed. I had thrived here by seeking out the most challenging courses and building relationships with teachers who shared my love of learning. My first period advanced placement chemistry class provided a welcome distraction from the morning's trauma. Mrs. Rodriguez was reviewing organic compound structures, and I lost myself in the familiar logic of molecular bonds and chemical reactions. Science had always been my refuge, a realm where questions had definitive answers and hard work produced measurable results. Miss Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez, called as I was packing up my notebooks after class. "Could you stay for a moment?" I approached her desk, wondering if she had noticed my distraction during the lesson. Mrs. Rodriguez had been my chemistry teacher for 2 years, and had written one of my strongest letters of recommendation for college applications. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about your having motivation. You fared back from any of the schools yet? My throat constricted as I remembered the morning's events. There have been some developments, I said carefully. Good developments, I hope. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Mrs. Rodriguez had invested significant time in helping me prepare for college applications, staying after school to help me design independent research projects and connecting me with mentors in the scientific community. She deserved to know the truth. I received several acceptances, including Harvard, I said, watching her face light up with excitement. Maya, that's incredible, you must be thrilled. When do you need to make your final decision? There are some complications with my family, I admitted. They have strong preferences about where I should attend college. Mrs. Rodriguez's expression shifted to concern. What kind of complications? I found myself telling her about the morning's events, though I left out some of the more painful details. She listened intently, her frown deepening as I described my parents' reaction to the acceptance letters. "This is a tragedy," she said when I finished. "You have worked too hard and achieved too much to let fear and misunderstanding derail your future. What are you planning to do?" "I'm going to contact the admissions offices directly," I said. "The physical letters are gone, but my acceptances should still be valid." "Absolutely. And Maya, if you need any support navigating this process, please don't hesitate to ask. You have allies here who believe in your potential." Her words brought tears to my eyes. After a morning of feeling completely alone and unsupported, it was reassuring to know that someone understood what these opportunities meant to me. The rest of the school day dragged by slowly. In AP Calculus, I found myself sketching graphs mechanically while mentally composing emails to admissions offices. During English literature, I barely heard the discussion of symbolism in The Great Gatsby because I was calculating the timeline for confirming my acceptance and enrolling in courses. Lunch period finally arrived, and I headed directly to the library with my laptop. The school's computer lab was always crowded, but I found a quiet corner table where I could work without interruption. Opening my email, I began crafting messages to each of the schools that had accepted me. The Harvard email was the most important and the most difficult to write. How do you explain to an admissions office that your parent destroyed your acceptance letter? How do you request confirmation of something that should be straightforward without sounding dramatic or unstable? After several drafts, I settled on a professional tone that emphasized the practical need for replacement documentation rather than the family drama behind it. I explained that my original acceptance materials had been damaged and requested electronic copies of all relevant documents, including scholarship information and enrollment deadlines. Similar emails went to Stanford, MIT, UC Berkeley, and the other schools. Each message was carefully crafted to sound routine rather than desperate, though my hands shook as I typed them. By the time lunch period ended, I had sent 7 emails and felt cautiously optimistic about the responses I might receive. These were professional institutions with organized record-keeping systems. Surely they would be able to provide the documentation I needed. My optimism carried me through the afternoon until I arrived at academic decathlon practice. Our team was preparing for the state championship, and I usually looked forward to these sessions. Today, however, the material felt pointless. What was the value of memorizing historical dates and scientific facts if my parents were determined to prevent me from using that knowledge in college? David Martinez, Our team coach and the school's guidance counselor noticed my lack of focus during the practice quiz on Renaissance art. Maya, could we talk privately for a few minutes? He asked after dismissing the other team members. I followed him to his office, a small space decorated with college pennants and motivational posters about academic achievement. Mr. Martinez had been instrumental in helping me navigate the college application process, providing guidance on essay writing and interview preparation. You seem distracted today, he observed, settling behind his desk. Is everything all right with your college applications? Something about his gentle concern broke down my remaining defenses. I found myself telling him the entire story, from discovering my mother with the letters to watching them disappear into the garbage disposal. He listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled as I continued. Maya, I'm so sorry this happened to you, he said when I finished. What your mother did was wrong, regardless of her intentions. You have the right to pursue your educational goals without sabotage from your family, but what can I do about it? I asked. Even if the colleges confirm my acceptances, how can I enroll without my parents' support? I'll need financial aid forms, tax information, all kinds of documentation they control. There are options, Mr. Martinez said thoughtfully. For students whose families are uncooperative with the financial aid process, there are dependency override procedures. It's not easy, and it requires significant documentation, but it's possible for exceptional students in difficult family situations. He pulled out a thick folder and began showing me forms and procedures I had never seen before. The process looked complicated and time-consuming, but it offered a pathway to independence that I hadn't known existed. The key, he explained, is documenting the conflict thoroughly. You'll need evidence that your family is actively preventing you from pursuing higher education despite your academic qualifications. Today's incident with the destroyed letters is actually significant evidence, especially if you can get corroboration from other adults who witnessed your parents' opposition to your college plans. I felt a spark of hope for the first time since morning. Would you be willing to provide that corroboration? Absolutely. I've seen firsthand how committed you are to your education and how your parents have discouraged your academic ambitions. I'll document every conversation we've had about this issue. We spent the next hour reviewing forms and procedures. The process would require patience and persistence, but it was feasible. More importantly, it would allow me to pursue my education without being held hostage by my parents' fears and limitations. There's something else you should know, Mr. Martinez said as we wrapped up our meeting. I received a call this morning from a Harvard admissions officer asking about your current status. Apparently they want to confirm some details about your application before finalizing scholarship awards. My heart leaped. What did you tell them? I told them you were an exceptional student who deserved every opportunity they could provide. But Maya, they mentioned they've been trying to reach you at home. Have your parents been intercepting calls? The realization hit me like a physical blow. Of course, if my mother had been monitoring my college applications for months, she would certainly be screening phone calls from universities. How many opportunities had I already missed because of her interference? I need to call them back immediately, I said, reaching for my phone. Use my office phone, Mr. Martinez suggested. That way you'll have privacy and a professional number on their caller ID. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number Mr. Martinez had written down. A receptionist answered on the second ring, and within minutes I was connected to Jennifer Walsh, the admissions counselor who had been trying to reach me. Miss Chen, I'm so glad you called, she said warmly. We have wonderful news about your application, but we need to finalize a few details regarding your scholarship package. Are you available to discuss this now? Yes, absolutely, I said, grabbing a pen to take notes. Based on your exceptional academic record and financial need assessment, we're prepared to offer you a full merit scholarship covering tuition, room, board, and books. Additionally, you've been selected for our summer bridge program, which would allow you to begin coursework in July and get acclimated to campus before the fall semester begins. I could barely breathe. Not only was my acceptance still valid, but they were offering even more support than I had originally understood. The summer program would give me additional preparation for pre-med coursework and early access to research opportunities. That sounds incredible, I managed to say. What do I need to do to accept? We'll need your enrollment deposit and housing preferences by April 15th, along with final transcripts and medical records for campus housing. I'll email you all the necessary forms this afternoon. Will you be able to access email reliably, or should I mail hard copies as well? Email is fine, I said quickly, not wanting to risk my parents intercepting physical mail. Is there anything else I need to know? Just that we're thrilled to welcome you to Harvard, Maya. Your application essay about serving underserved communities through medicine was particularly compelling. We look forward to supporting your goals. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for several moments. Harvard not only still wanted me, but they were offering support beyond anything I had imagined possible. The scholarship would cover every expense, making my parents' financial control irrelevant. The summer program would give me a head start on my studies and early independence from home. Good news, Mr. Martinez asked, though my expression had probably already answered his question. The best possible news, I replied. They're offering me a full scholarship and early admission to a summer bridge program. Everything I need to attend without any financial dependence on my parents. That's fantastic, Maya. You've earned every bit of this opportunity. As I gathered my things to leave his office, I felt a transformation taking place inside me. The helpless despair of the morning was being replaced by determination and clarity. My parents had tried to destroy my dreams, but they had only succeeded in forcing me to find alternative paths to achieve them. The evening ahead would be challenging. I would need to confront my family about the intercepted phone calls and establish new boundaries about my college plans. But for the first time all day, I felt capable of handling whatever opposition they might offer. Walking through the school hallways toward the parking lot, I noticed details that had escaped me that morning. Bulletin boards covered with college fair announcements and scholarship opportunities. Trophy cases displaying academic achievement awards. Inspirational quotes about perseverance and following dreams painted on classroom walls. This building had nurtured my intellectual growth for 4 years. In a few months, I would leave it behind for Harvard University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. My parents' attempts to keep me small and local had failed spectacularly. The drive home gave me time to plan my approach for the conversation ahead. I would need to be strategic, presenting my college plans as settled rather than negotiable. The scholarship and summer program eliminated their primary arguments about cost and practicality. My academic success spoke for itself. Most importantly, I would need to establish consequences for future interference. No more destroyed letters, no more intercepted phone calls, no more sabotage disguised as protection. I was 17 years old, legally still a minor, but emotionally and intellectually ready to take control of my own future. The Chen Electronics sign came into view as I turned onto our street, reminding me of the family business expectations that had dominated my childhood. Soon I would be building a different kind of legacy, one based on service to others rather than profit margins and inventory management. My phone buzzed with an email notification as I parked in our driveway. The message was from Jennifer Walsh at Harvard, containing all the enrollment forms and program information she had promised. Everything was real, official, and waiting for my signature. I sat in my car for a few extra minutes, savoring the moment. In 12 hours, I had experienced the deepest betrayal and the most wonderful validation of my life. My family had shown me exactly how little they understood or supported my dreams. Harvard had shown me exactly how much my achievements were worth to people who recognized talent and dedication. The choice between these two worlds had never been clearer. Tonight, I would begin the process of choosing myself and my future over fear and limitation. My parents had taught me to work hard and dream big. They just hadn't expected me to dream beyond their ability to control the outcome. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my backpack and walked toward the house, ready for whatever confrontation awaited me. In my pocket, my phone contained emails that would change the trajectory of my entire life. My parents thought they had ended my story that morning. Instead, they had simply forced me to become the author of my own future. Part 6. My name. The confrontation builds. The front door of our Scottsdale home felt heavier than usual as I pushed it open, armed with the knowledge that Harvard had just offered me everything my parents claimed was impossible. The smell of my mother's cooking drifted from the kitchen, something with ginger and soy sauce that would normally make my mouth water. Tonight, however, my stomach was too knotted with anticipation to appreciate food. "Maya, is that you?" my mother called from the kitchen. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. "I'll be right there," I called back, heading upstairs to my room first. I needed a few moments to collect myself before the conversation that would determine the next phase of my life. My bedroom looked exactly as I had left it that morning, but it felt different now. The empty space on my desk where the acceptance letters had been hidden now seemed less like a void and more like a cleared surface ready for new possibilities. I set my backpack down and pulled out my laptop, quickly checking for any additional emails from the universities I had contacted. 3 new messages waited in my inbox. Stanford had confirmed my acceptance and provided electronic copies of all enrollment materials. MIT had responded with similar documentation, along with details about their pre-orientation program for incoming students. UC Berkeley had not only confirmed my admission but had upgraded my financial aid package after reviewing my academic achievements from the current semester. Each email felt like validation, proof that the morning's destruction had been pointless and petty. My parents had tried to erase my future, but the future had simply moved online, beyond their ability to control or manipulate. The sound of voices from downstairs indicated that my father and Jason had arrived home from the electronics stores. I could hear them discussing the day's sales figures and inventory challenges, their conversation punctuated by my mother's occasional comments from the kitchen. It was the soundtrack of my childhood, familiar and comfortable, yet suddenly it felt like background noise from a life I was preparing to leave behind. I opened a new document on my laptop and began drafting talking points for the conversation ahead. I needed to be clear, confident, and prepared for every argument they might raise. The scholarship information would be my strongest weapon, but I also wanted to address their concerns about distance, cultural fit, and family loyalty. 20 minutes later, I descended the stairs with my laptop under my arm and printed copies of the Harvard correspondence in a manila folder. My family was already seated around our dining table, which my mother had set with her good dishes. The gesture struck me as oddly formal, as if she sensed that this dinner would be different from our usual casual weeknight meals. "How was school today, sweetheart?" my father asked as I took my seat. "Productive," I replied, placing the folder beside my plate. I received some important communications about my college applications. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Jason looked up from his plate with sudden interest. My father's expression became carefully neutral, the look he wore during difficult business negotiations. "I thought we resolved the college issue this morning," my mother said quietly. "You resolved it by destroying my acceptance letters," I replied. "But destroying paper doesn't destroy reality. Harvard called the school today because they've been trying to reach me here at home. Apparently someone has been screening my calls." My father set down his utensils and leaned back in his chair. "Maya, we've had this conversation before. Those schools are not appropriate choices for someone in your situation." "What situation is that exactly?" I asked. "Being the daughter of successful business owners. Having a 4.0 GPA and perfect attendance. Scoring in the top 1% on standardized tests. Which part of my situation makes me inappropriate for Harvard?" "Don't be dramatic," Jason interjected. "Dad means someone who has family responsibilities. Someone who belongs to a community here in Phoenix. Someone who shouldn't abandon the people who invested in her success. Invested in my success, I repeated slowly. You mean like paying for my education and encouraging my academic achievements, because I seem to remember doing most of that work myself. That's enough, my mother said sharply. We will not sit here and listen to you disparage your family. Everything we've done has been for your benefit. Including destroying my acceptance letters. How exactly did that benefit me? The question hung in the air for several seconds. My parents exchanged glances, that silent communication that happens between long-married couples when they need to coordinate their response to a challenge. We were protecting you from making a mistake that would affect the rest of your life, my father said finally. College decisions shouldn't be made based on prestige or excitement. They should be made based on practical considerations and family values. Then let's talk about practical considerations. I said, opening my laptop and pulling up the Harvard email. Full merit scholarship covering tuition, room, board, and books. Total value over 4 years, approximately $300,000. Summer bridge program providing additional academic support and early research opportunities. Pre-medical advising from faculty who have trained doctors now working at major hospitals across the country. I could see the numbers registering on my father's face. As a businessman, he understood the value of a free education at an elite institution, even if he didn't want to admit it. Money isn't everything, my mother said, though her voice lacked conviction. You're right, I agreed. Which is why I also want to discuss the academic opportunities. Harvard Medical School has a 93% acceptance rate for their undergraduates who meet the GPA and MCAT requirements. Compare that to Arizona State, where pre-med students have a 62% acceptance rate for medical school placement. Medical school, Jason scoffed. Still chasing that fantasy? Do you know how many people start pre-med and never finish? Do you know how many doctors end up buried in debt and working for hospitals that treat them like employees? Do you know how many people never try because their families convinced them it was impossible? I countered. Do you know how many talented individuals settled for safe choices and spent their lives wondering what might have been? There's nothing wrong with safe choices, my father said. Safe choices are how your mother and I built this life. We came to America with nothing, and we created security for our family through careful planning and realistic goals. And I admire that, I said sincerely. Your accomplishments are impressive and important. But my goals don't diminish your success, and your success doesn't require me to limit my potential. Limit your potential, my mother repeated with frustration. Maya, we're trying to help you understand your potential. You're intelligent and hardworking, which means you could be incredibly successful running Chen Electronics. You could expand the business, maybe even franchise it. You could build something substantial right here in Phoenix. But what if that's not what I want to build? I asked. What if my idea of success looks different from yours? Then maybe your idea of success is selfish, Jason said bluntly. Maybe you're so focused on impressing strangers that you've forgotten about the people who actually matter. The comment stung because it contained a grain of truth that I had been wrestling with myself. Was I choosing Harvard partly to prove something? Was there an element of ego in my academic ambitions that went beyond genuine desire to help others? Maybe I am being selfish, I acknowledged. But is it selfish to use gifts I've been given? Is it selfish to pursue opportunities that could help me serve my community better? Is it selfish to want to make the most of talents that took years to develop? It's selfish if pursuing those opportunities means abandoning your family, my mother said firmly. How am I abandoning you? I'll be in college for 4 years, then medical school for 4 more years. After that, I could return to Phoenix as a doctor and serve patients here. I could contribute to this community in ways that wouldn't be possible with a business degree. 8 years, my father said quietly. 8 years away from home, surrounded by people who don't share our values or understand our culture. 8 years of being influenced by professors and classmates who will teach you to look down on everything you came from. That's not true, I protested, though I could hear the pain in his voice. College doesn't brainwash people. It exposes them to new ideas and perspectives, but it doesn't erase their core values or family connections. Doesn't it? My mother asked. Look at your cousin Emma in San Francisco. She went to Berkeley for computer science, and now she barely calls her parents. Look at our neighbor's son who went to Stanford for law school. He comes home twice a year and spends the entire visit complaining about how backward Phoenix is compared to California. The examples hit close to home because I knew both people they were referencing. Emma had indeed become distant from her family, though I had always assumed it was due to personality differences rather than her education. The neighbor's son was notoriously pretentious, but I had attributed that to his individual character rather than his Stanford experience. Those are individual cases, I said. They don't represent everyone who goes to college outside Arizona. They represent what happens when children choose prestige over family loyalty, Jason said. They represent what happens when parents invest everything in kids who decide they're too good for the life they were given. I don't think I'm too good for this life, I said, looking around the dining room where I had eaten thousands of meals, where my parents had helped me with homework and celebrated my achievements. I think I'm capable of a different kind of life. There's a distinction, is there? My father asked. Because from where I sit, it looks like you've decided that everything we've built isn't good enough for you. It looks like you think our values and our community aren't sophisticated enough for someone with your intelligence. The accusation was so far from my actual feelings that I struggled to respond. My parents had given me everything they could, had supported my education even when they didn't understand my passion for academic achievement. Their values of hard work, integrity, and family loyalty had shaped who I was at my core. I don't think any of those things, I said quietly. I think you've given me tools and values that prepare me to succeed anywhere, including Harvard. I think the strength and work ethic you've modeled will serve me well in medical school. I think the integrity you've taught me will make me a better doctor and a better person. For a moment, my father's expression softened. I could see him considering my words, perhaps recognizing that his fears might be based more on assumption than evidence. Then my mother spoke again, and the moment passed. Words are easy, Maya. Promises about staying connected and remembering your roots are easy to make when you're 17 and eager to leave home. But life has a way of changing people's priorities. Distance has a way of making the familiar seem small and unimportant. Then don't you owe it to me to trust that the values you've instilled are strong enough to withstand 4 years of college? Don't you owe it to yourselves to believe that 18 years of parenting have created someone with enough character to maintain family relationships regardless of geography? We owe it to ourselves to protect our family from unnecessary risks, my mother replied. We owe it to you to prevent you from making decisions you'll regret when you're older and wiser. And what if I regret not taking this opportunity? I asked. What if I spend the rest of my life wondering what I could have accomplished if my parents had believed in me enough to let me try? The question silenced the table. Even Jason seemed to recognize the weight of what I was asking. We sat in uncomfortable quiet for several minutes, the sound of our grandfather clock marking time that felt suddenly precious and limited. There's something else you need to consider, I said finally, opening the folder I had brought to dinner. This morning you destroyed my acceptance letters, but you didn't destroy my acceptances. This afternoon I received confirmation from multiple universities that my admissions are still valid and that scholarship offers are still available. I placed printed copies of the emails on the table, spreading them out so everyone could see the university letterheads and scholarship amounts. I also learned that Harvard has been trying to reach me for weeks about additional opportunities, but someone has been screening my phone calls. That stops now. My father picked up the Harvard printout and read it carefully. His businessman's eye immediately focused on the financial details, and I could see him calculating the value of what I was being offered. "This is legitimate?" he asked. "Completely legitimate. You can call Harvard admissions tomorrow morning to verify every detail." $300,000, he murmured almost to himself, plus connections to medical schools, research opportunities, and a network of alumni working in hospitals and research institutions across the country, I added. Plus the prestige that comes with a Harvard degree when I apply to medical school. Prestige that won't mean anything if you can't handle the academic pressure, Jason said, though his usual confidence seemed shaken by the documentation in front of him. "Harvard isn't Desert Ridge High School. You'll be competing with students who've had private tutors since kindergarten, and whose parents are doctors and lawyers and politicians." "Then I'll work harder than they do," I said simply. "I'll study longer, ask more questions, and take advantage of every resource the university provides. The same way I've approached every academic challenge I've ever faced." "And what about the cultural issues?" my mother asked. "What about feeling isolated and out of place among people who've never worked a day in their lives? What about the possibility that diversity is actually valuable to them?" I countered. "What about the possibility that my background and perspective are exactly what they want in their student body?" I could see my parents struggling with concepts that challenged their fundamental assumptions about elite institutions and social hierarchies. They had built their lives around the belief that safety lay in staying within familiar communities and established patterns. The idea that their daughter might not only survive but thrive in an unfamiliar environment was difficult for them to process. "I need to think about this," my father said finally, gathering the printouts into a neat stack. "This is not a decision to be made impulsively based on emotion." "I agree," I said. "Take all the time you need to research Harvard, to verify the scholarship details, to speak with counselors and other parents whose children have attended elite universities. But while you're thinking, I need you to understand that I'm moving forward with the application process." "What does that mean exactly?" my mother asked. "It means I'm submitting my enrollment deposit and housing preferences by the deadline. It means I'm registering for the summer bridge program. It means I'm preparing to attend Harvard in the fall with or without your blessing." The declaration hung in the air like a challenge. I had never spoken to my parents with such direct defiance, had never drawn such clear lines about my independence and my future. "You're 17 years old," my mother said, her voice rising with anger. "You cannot make these decisions unilaterally. You cannot attend college without parental consent and support." "Actually, I can," I said, though my voice was gentler than hers. "I've researched the legal requirements. With proper documentation, I can establish financial independence for college purposes. Mr. Martinez has helped me understand the process." Martinez, who has worked with hundreds of college-bound students and who understands the opportunities available to academically qualified candidates, I clarified. "Mr. Martinez, who has no agenda other than helping students achieve their educational goals. Unlike your family, who clearly has an agenda to hold you back," Jason said sarcastically. "Not hold me back," I said. "Keep me close." There's a difference, and I understand the motivation, but the effect is the same. My parents sat quietly, absorbing the reality that their 17-year-old daughter was prepared to pursue her education independently if necessary. I could see them grappling with the recognition that their attempts to control my future had pushed me toward the very independence they feared. "What would it take?" my father asked suddenly. What would take? What would it take for you to consider staying in Arizona? What would convince you that you could build a meaningful life here?" The question surprised me because it suggested he was willing to negotiate rather than simply forbid. It also forced me to examine my own motivations more honestly than I had been comfortable doing. "I don't think there's anything that would convince me to turn down Harvard," I said slowly. "But there are things that would make me more likely to return to Arizona after my education is complete. Such as support for my goals instead of resistance. Acknowledgement that becoming a doctor is a valid path, not a betrayal of family values. respect for my decision-making abilities, and trust in my character. I paused, considering whether to voice the deeper need that had driven many of my choices. And recognition that I've earned the right to pursue my dreams just like Jason earned the right to pursue his. My brother looked up sharply at the comparison. My dreams didn't involve abandoning the family business. Your dreams didn't require you to abandon anything because they aligned with what our parents wanted for you, I replied. That doesn't make them more valid than mine, it just makes them more convenient. The observation seemed to strike him in an unexpected way. For the first time in the conversation, Jason looked uncomfortable rather than defensive. Maya has a point, my father said quietly. We've never asked Jason to sacrifice his goals for the family good. We've never suggested that his choices were selfish or impractical. Because my choices were practical, Jason protested. Because I chose to build on what we already had instead of chasing fantasies. Harvard Medical School isn't a fantasy, my mother said, so quietly that we all turned to stare at her. A full scholarship to Harvard isn't a fantasy. Maybe we need to reconsider what we mean by practical. The admission seemed to cost her considerable effort, but it opened a door that had been firmly closed that morning. If my mother could acknowledge that my goals had merit, perhaps there was room for compromise and understanding. I don't want to hurt this family, I said. I don't want to abandon the people who raised me and supported my education, but I also can't abandon myself to make other people comfortable. The words hung in the air as we all contemplated the choice between fear and faith, between control and trust, between the safety of the familiar and the potential of the unknown. Parts 10-14. The final resolution. The silence that followed my declaration stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. My father continued to study the Harvard documentation while my mother stared at her barely touched dinner. Jason picked at his food, clearly uncomfortable with the shift in family dynamics that was occurring before his eyes. I need some air, my father announced suddenly, standing from the table. Maya, would you walk with me? It wasn't really a request. I followed him through the sliding glass doors onto our back patio, where the desert evening was settling into its familiar rhythm of cooling temperatures and emerging stars. Our backyard looked the same as always, with its carefully maintained desert landscaping and the pool where I had spent countless summer afternoons, but tonight everything felt charged with possibility and change. My father settled into one of the patio chairs and gestured for me to take the seat beside him. We sat quietly for several minutes, listening to the distant hum of traffic on Scottsdale Road and the occasional call of a night bird. This was our old pattern from when I was younger, these quiet conversations away from the rest of the family when important topics needed discussion. Tell me honestly, he said finally. Is this about proving something to us, or is it genuinely about your future? The question caught me off guard with its directness. I had expected anger or ultimatums, not this kind of thoughtful inquiry into my motivations. Both, maybe, I admitted. I won't lie and say there isn't some satisfaction in showing you what I'm capable of achieving. But that's not the primary reason I want to go to Harvard. What is the primary reason? I looked up at the Arizona sky, already dark enough to see the first stars appearing despite the city lights. Because I believe I can make a difference as a doctor that I couldn't make any other way. Because I want to work in communities where people can't afford healthcare, and having a Harvard medical degree will open doors that might otherwise stay closed. You could serve the community right here in Phoenix, he pointed out. There are plenty of underserved neighborhoods in this city. That's true, and maybe I will come back here eventually, but if I'm going to serve effectively, I want the best possible medical training. I want to learn from professors who are pushing the boundaries of medical knowledge. I want to work alongside researchers who are developing new treatments for diseases that affect the communities I care about. My father nodded slowly, processing my explanation. And you believe Harvard offers opportunities you couldn't find at the University of Arizona Medical School? I know it does. The research funding alone is exponentially greater. The faculty includes people who literally wrote the textbooks I would use anywhere else. The clinical rotations include hospitals that handle the most complex cases from around the world. What about the cultural fit? Your mother raised valid concerns about feeling isolated among students from very different backgrounds. I had been thinking about this question since our dinner conversation began. I think there might be some initial adjustment challenges, I said honestly. But diversity works both ways. They need students who understand what it's like to work in a family business, who understand immigrant communities, who have experience with middle-class financial pressures. My background isn't a disadvantage at Harvard, it's exactly what makes me valuable to them. And after medical school, what then? Residency in internal medicine or family practice, probably somewhere that serves diverse populations, then either community medicine or possibly public health work. I want to focus on preventive care and health education in communities that have been historically underserved. My father was quiet for a long time, looking out at the pool where the underwater lights created shifting patterns on the surface. "Your mother is terrified of losing you," he said, eventually. "She's not losing me, she's launching me, that's not how it feels from her perspective. From her perspective, she's watching her daughter choose strangers over family, prestige over loyalty, individual achievement over collective responsibility." "Is that how you see it too?" He considered the question carefully. "I see a young woman who has worked incredibly hard and achieved something remarkable. I also see parents who are frightened that their daughter's success will take her to places where they can't follow or protect her. You can't protect me from everything, Dad. At some point you have to trust that 18 years of parenting have prepared me to make good decisions independently." 18 years, he repeated. It doesn't feel like nearly enough time. We sat in comfortable silence again, both of us aware that this conversation was reshaping our relationship in fundamental ways. I was no longer asking for permission but rather explaining choices I had already made. He was no longer issuing parental decrees but rather grappling with the reality that his daughter had become an adult capable of charting her own course. "The business will survive without you," he said suddenly. "I know Jason is more capable than you probably give him credit for. He understands operations and customer service in ways that come naturally to him. I've never doubted Jason's abilities in the business world, I just have different abilities that point in different directions. Your mother built her entire identity around being the mother of successful children. If you leave for Harvard, she'll interpret that as evidence that she failed to create the kind of home you wanted to stay in." This insight into my mother's psychology was new and painful. How do I reassure her that my leaving isn't a rejection of what she created? "I'm not sure you can, at least not immediately. Time will have to demonstrate that your education enhances rather than replaces your connection to family. Will you help me convince her to support this decision?" My father stood and walked to the edge of the patio, looking out at the lights of Phoenix stretching toward the mountains. "I think the more important question is whether you're prepared to move forward even if she doesn't come around immediately." The question forced me to confront the possibility that my mother might never approve of my choice, that family dinners might remain tense and complicated for years to come. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm prepared for that possibility. Then let's go back inside and figure out how to make this work." The conversation that followed was unlike any family meeting we had ever held. My father took the lead, asking practical questions about deadlines, financial aid procedures, and academic requirements. My mother participated reluctantly, her questions focused on logistics like housing, meal plans, and transportation rather than the broader philosophical issues that had dominated our earlier discussion. Jason surprised me by asking thoughtful questions about the summer bridge program and whether I would have opportunities to gain business experience alongside my pre-medical coursework. For the first time, he seemed to recognize that my path might involve skills and knowledge that could ultimately benefit our family in unexpected ways. "What about Christmas break?" my mother asked. "Will you come home or will you find excuses to stay away?" I'll come home every Christmas unless there are medical emergencies or academic commitments that make it impossible. Harvard students don't stop being part of their families. And summers after freshman year, that depends on internship opportunities and research programs. But I'll prioritize time at home whenever possible, especially during the years before medical school when summer flexibility is greatest. Slowly we worked through the practical details that would make my Harvard attendance feasible. My parents agreed to provide tax information and other documentation needed for financial aid processing. They agreed to stop screening my phone calls and to forward any college-related mail that arrived at our home address. Most importantly, they agreed to research Harvard independently, talking to other parents and perhaps even visiting the campus before making final judgments about whether the environment was appropriate for their daughter. "There's one more thing," I said as our family meeting was winding down. "I want you all to understand that this decision isn't about rejecting what you've given me. Everything I've accomplished builds on the foundation you created. The work ethic, the integrity, the commitment to serving others, those values came from this family." "We know," my mother said softly, though I could hear the sadness in her voice. "We're just not ready to let you go." "You're not letting me go, you're letting me grow." The following weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, planning, and gradual acceptance. My parents did research Harvard as promised, speaking with other families whose children had attended elite universities and even arranging a phone conversation with a Phoenix area Harvard alumna who had returned to Arizona after medical school. Each conversation seemed to ease their concerns marginally. They learned that Harvard had extensive support systems for first-generation college students, that the campus community was more diverse and welcoming than they had assumed, and that many graduates did indeed return to serve their home communities with enhanced skills and connections. My mother accompanied me to a send-off party organized by Mr. Martinez for college-bound seniors from Desert Ridge High. Meeting other families who were navigating similar transitions seemed to help her understand that she wasn't the only parent struggling with mixed emotions about their child's departure. "Mrs. Rodriguez told me she's never had a student as dedicated as you," my mother mentioned as we drove home from the party. "She said Harvard is lucky to have you, not the other way around." Mrs. Rodriguez has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole process. Maybe I should have been more supportive too. The admission was quiet and tentative, but it represented a significant shift in my mother's perspective. Over the following days, she began asking different kinds of questions about my plans, focusing on how she could help me succeed rather than how she could convince me to stay. When the Harvard Summer Bridge program materials arrived, she read through them carefully and helped me decide which courses would best prepare me for pre-medical requirements. When housing forms needed completion, she researched dormitory options and helped me rank my preferences based on proximity to academic buildings and dining facilities. The transformation wasn't complete or immediate. There were still moments when her fear would surface, usually late at night when she would come to my room to ask worried questions about social pressures, academic competition, or financial management. But these conversations felt different from our earlier conflicts. They felt like a mother preparing her daughter for independence rather than a mother trying to prevent independence entirely. My father threw himself into research about Harvard's business programs, discovering that many medical school graduates also pursued MBA degrees or became involved in healthcare administration. He began talking about ways that my medical knowledge could enhance our family business, perhaps through occupational health services or employee wellness programs. "You could revolutionize workplace health in the retail electronics industry," he suggested one evening as we reviewed my course selection for freshman year. "There are probably ergonomic issues and repetitive stress concerns that someone with medical training could address more effectively than traditional consultants." His enthusiasm was touching, even if his specific suggestions seemed premature. More importantly, he was finding ways to envision my education as additive to our family rather than subtractive from it. Jason's adjustment took a different form. He began asking me to teach him some of the study techniques and organizational skills that had enabled my academic success. As he prepared to take on additional responsibilities in the family business, he wanted to develop the same systematic approach to learning that had served me well in school. Maybe I should consider taking some business courses at a community college, he mentioned one afternoon as we were updating inventory tracking systems at the main store. If you can handle Harvard-level coursework, I should be able to handle basic accounting and management classes. You absolutely should, I encouraged. And if you want help with applications or study strategies, I'm happy to share what I've learned. For the first time in our lives, Jason and I were relating to each other as collaborators rather than competitors. My academic achievements no longer seemed to threaten his position in the family hierarchy, and his business skills no longer seemed to diminish my intellectual pursuits. The night before my departure for Harvard, my family threw me a farewell dinner at our favorite Phoenix restaurant. The conversation was lighter than it had been in months, filled with jokes about Boston weather and speculation about what kinds of food would be available in the Harvard dining halls. Take pictures of everything, my mother instructed. I want to see your dormitory room, your classrooms, the library, everything. And call us at least twice a week, my father added. Not just quick check-ins, but real conversations about what you're learning and experiencing. I will, I promised. And I expect you to update me on business developments and family news. This isn't goodbye forever, it's goodbye for now. That night, as I finished packing the last of my belongings, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. 4 months earlier, I had been a high school senior hoping for college acceptances and family support. The acceptances had come, but not the support, at least not initially. My parents' attempt to destroy my college letters had been cruel and misguided, but it had also forced me to develop independence and self-advocacy skills that I might not have learned otherwise. Fighting for my educational opportunities had taught me to articulate my goals, research my options, and stand firm in my convictions. More importantly, the conflict had ultimately strengthened our family relationships by forcing honest conversations about fear, expectations, and love. My parents' initial resistance had come from a place of genuine concern, even if their methods had been destructive. Working through that resistance together had created deeper understanding and mutual respect. As I placed the last items in my suitcase, I found the folder where I had kept printed copies of all my college acceptance materials. The Harvard letter at the front of the folder was pristine and official, a replacement for the original that had been fed into our garbage disposal months earlier. Looking at that letter now, I felt gratitude rather than anger toward my mother for her moment of destructive panic. Her attempt to control my future had failed, but it had also revealed to both of us how committed I was to my educational goals. Sometimes you don't know how much something means to you until someone tries to take it away. The next morning, as my parents drove me to Sky Harbor Airport for my flight to Boston, I noticed my mother crying quietly in the passenger seat. When we reached the departure area, she hugged me tightly and whispered an apology I hadn't expected. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you sooner," she said. "I'm sorry I let my fears override my faith in what we raised you to become." "You raised me to be strong enough to fight for what I believe in," I replied. Even when that meant fighting you, my father's goodbye was characteristically practical. Work hard, stay connected with family, and remember that success is measured by how much you contribute to others, not just by how much you achieve for yourself. "I'll remember," I promised. As my plane lifted off from Phoenix, I looked down at the city that had shaped my first 18 years. The desert landscape stretched toward the mountains, dotted with the suburban neighborhoods and business districts where I had learned to dream bigger than my immediate circumstances suggested was possible. In a few hours, I would land in Boston and begin the next chapter of my education. But I was carrying with me everything valuable from the previous chapter: work ethic learned from parents who had built something from nothing, resilience developed through academic challenges, and the hard-won knowledge that family relationships can survive honest disagreement and emerge stronger on the other side. 4 years later, as I walked across the stage to receive my Harvard diploma, I saw my entire family in the audience cheering louder than anyone else in the auditorium. My mother was crying again, but this time with pride rather than fear. My father was taking pictures frantically, determined to document every moment of his daughter's achievement. Jason had taken time off from the electronics stores to attend my graduation, bringing his new wife and their infant son to meet their accomplished aunt. He had completed an associate degree in business administration and was implementing innovative customer service programs that had increased revenue across all Chen Electronics locations. "So what's next, Dr. Chen?" he asked at the graduation dinner our family hosted that evening. I wasn't Dr. Chen yet, wouldn't earn that title for another 4 years, but I appreciated his confidence in my future medical school success. "Next is Harvard Medical School," I replied. "And after that, a residency program that will prepare me to serve communities that need experienced, culturally competent physicians." "Any chance that community might include Phoenix?" my mother asked hopefully. "There's always a chance," I said. "But wherever I end up practicing medicine, I'll be bringing Phoenix values with me. Hard work, integrity, commitment to family, and the understanding that success means lifting others up alongside yourself." My parents had been right about one thing during those difficult months of conflict and reconciliation: college had changed me, but not in the ways they had feared. Harvard had expanded my knowledge, refined my skills, and connected me with opportunities I couldn't have imagined from suburban Phoenix. But it hadn't erased my core identity or severed my family connections. If anything, the distance had clarified what I valued most about my upbringing and strengthened my commitment to using my education in service of others. The morning my mother had destroyed my acceptance letters, she thought she was protecting our family from dissolution and me from abandonment by an elite institution that would never truly accept someone like me. Instead, she had set in motion a series of events that proved both fears groundless. Harvard had not only accepted me but had provided the support, mentorship, and opportunities that enabled me to thrive academically and socially. My family had not dissolved under the pressure of my departure but had grown stronger through the process of learning to trust my judgment and support my independence. Years later, as I established my medical practice in a Phoenix neighborhood with a large population of immigrant families, I would often think about that morning when my future seemed to disappear into a garbage disposal. My mother's moment of panic had taught me that dreams worth pursuing are strong enough to survive temporary setbacks and determined enough to find alternative paths to fulfillment. The patients I served would benefit not just from my Harvard medical education but from my family's immigrant experience. My understanding of financial pressures on working families and my knowledge of what it means to fight for opportunities that others take for granted. In the end, both my mother's fears and my own dreams had been realized, but not in the ways either of us had expected. I had received the elite education I had worked toward, but I had used it to strengthen rather than abandon my connections to home. My family had kept their daughter close, but not through control or limitation. They had kept me close through the love that eventually learned to trust, the support that eventually learned to let go, and the values that had always prepared me to succeed wherever my path might lead. Walking through the corridors of Desert Ridge High School that Tuesday morning felt different than it had just 24 hours earlier. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter, the conversations louder, and every interaction carried new weight now that I understood the true scope of what lay ahead. My conversation with Mr. Martinez had armed me with knowledge about dependency overrides and financial independence procedures, but more importantly, it had given me hope that my path forward was still viable despite my family's opposition. The morning progressed with typical senior year routine until third period AP Biology, where Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside after class to discuss my college plans. Unlike my other teachers who had been supportive but distant about my applications, Mrs. Patterson had taken a personal interest in my academic trajectory, particularly my research project on community health disparities that had earned recognition at the state science fair. Maya, I've been meaning to follow up on your college responses, she said as other students filed out of the classroom. Have you heard anything definitive yet? Something in her tone suggested she already knew more than she was letting on, which made me wonder if word about my family situation had somehow spread among the faculty. Desert Ridge was large enough to maintain student privacy, but small enough that teachers sometimes shared concerns about particularly promising students facing unusual obstacles. There have been some developments, I said carefully, using the same phrase I had offered Mrs. Rodriguez the day before. I received an interesting phone call yesterday afternoon, Mrs. Patterson continued. A research coordinator from Harvard's undergraduate science program wanted to verify details about your independent research methodology and findings. Apparently, they're considering you for a special summer research opportunity that's typically reserved for sophomores and juniors. My heart began racing as I absorbed this information. Not only was my acceptance still valid, but Harvard was actively seeking to provide additional opportunities for academic advancement. The irony was overwhelming. While my mother had been destroying acceptance letters in our kitchen, Harvard administrators had been making phone calls to expand my educational prospects. What kind of research opportunity? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the excitement building in my chest. Community health epidemiology with a focus on immigrant populations. The position includes housing, meal plan, and a research stipend that would essentially cover all your summer expenses while giving you graduate-level research experience before you even begin undergraduate coursework. The opportunity sounded almost too good to be true, precisely aligned with my interests in serving underserved communities while providing the practical experience that would strengthen my future medical school applications. More importantly, it would establish my financial independence from my parents even sooner than I had originally planned. What would I need to do to apply? That's the remarkable part, Mrs. Patterson said with a smile. You don't need to apply. The position is being offered to you directly based on your research presentation and academic record. They need a response by the end of the week. I felt dizzy with the implications of what she was telling me. In less than 48 hours, I had gone from having my acceptance letters destroyed to being offered an elite research position that would accelerate my academic timeline and remove any remaining financial obstacles to my education. There is one complication, Mrs. Patterson added. The program begins in mid-June, which means you would need to relocate to Massachusetts immediately after graduation. There wouldn't be time for a traditional summer break at home. The timeline was aggressive, but it also eliminated the potential for additional family interference. If I accepted the research position, my transition to Harvard would happen quickly and decisively, minimizing opportunities for my parents to create new obstacles or attempt further sabotage. I'm definitely interested, I said. How do I respond formally? I have the coordinator's direct contact information. You can call her this afternoon during lunch period from my classroom if you want privacy for the conversation. Privacy. The word reminded me that I was still navigating a complex situation at home where my phone calls were being monitored and my mail was being screened. Making important decisions about my future required spaces and resources beyond my parents' oversight. Mrs. Patterson, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Have you ever had students whose families opposed their educational goals? How did those situations typically resolve? She considered the question thoughtfully before responding. Unfortunately, I've seen several cases over the years where talented students faced family resistance to college attendance, usually related to financial concerns or cultural expectations. The outcomes varied significantly depending on the student's determination and the resources available to support their independence. What advice would you give to students in those situations? Document everything. Build relationships with adults who can provide references and support. Research all available options for financial independence.
And remember that family relationships can heal over time, but missed educational opportunities rarely come around again. Her advice aligned with what Mr. Martinez had recommended, but hearing it from a second trusted adult strengthened my confidence that I was approaching my situation appropriately. The pattern was clear: establish independence first, maintain hope for family reconciliation second. The lunch period phone call to Harvard's research coordinator exceeded even my optimistic expectations. Sarah Williams explained that my science fair research on health disparities in immigrant communities had attracted attention because it demonstrated both methodological sophistication and genuine commitment to addressing social justice issues through scientific inquiry. We rarely see undergraduate-level research that combines rigorous data analysis with such clear understanding of community health challenges, she explained. Your work suggests you have the intellectual maturity and social awareness to contribute meaningfully to our summer research team. The research project she described involved collaborating with graduate students and faculty to study health outcomes in Boston's diverse immigrant communities, using both quantitative analysis of public health data and qualitative interviews with community members. My background as the daughter of immigrants would provide valuable perspective for the research team, while my academic skills would enable me to contribute to data collection and analysis. The position includes housing in Harvard's summer residence halls, full meal plan, access to all university facilities, and a research stipend of $8,000 for the 10-week program, Dr. Williams continued.
Regarding college attendance, by the time I reached academic decathlon practice that afternoon, I was ready to share my news with Mr. Martinez and seek his guidance about managing the family dynamics around my accelerated departure timeline. "Maya, you look like someone who has received exceptionally good news," he observed as I entered his office. "The best possible news," I confirmed, explaining about the research opportunity and summer program offer. His face lit up with genuine pride and excitement. "This is extraordinary, Maya. Summer research opportunities at Harvard are incredibly competitive, even for current students. The fact that they're offering you this position before you've even begun undergraduate coursework speaks volumes about their assessment of your potential. It also changes the timeline significantly," I pointed out. "Instead of having a summer to gradually prepare my family for my departure, I'll be leaving for Massachusetts 3 days after graduation. How do you think your parents will respond to that news? I think they'll be shocked initially, then probably angry that I'm making such a major decision independently. But ultimately, I don't think they'll be able to argue with the academic and financial advantages of the opportunity." Mr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "The key will be presenting this as a logical continuation of the path you've already established rather than a sudden change in plans. Emphasize the research experience, the financial benefits, and the way this opportunity enhances your medical school preparation. What about the fact that I'll be gone all summer, instead of spending time at home before college? Frame it as an investment in your family's long-term interests. The research experience will strengthen your medical school applications, which improves your chances of admission to top programs. The stipend reduces the financial burden on your parents. The early start gives you additional preparation for academic success." His strategic approach made sense, but I also knew that my parents' objections went deeper than practical concerns about money or academic preparation. Their resistance was fundamentally about control and fear of losing their daughter to a world they didn't understand or trust. "Mr. Martinez, what if they refuse to sign the necessary paperwork or provide the documentation I need for the summer program?" That's where the dependency override process becomes crucial. If your parents actively interfere with your educational opportunities, that provides additional evidence for establishing financial independence. I've already begun documenting our conversations about your situation, and I'll be prepared to provide written testimony about their opposition to your academic goals. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes as we reviewed the specific forms and procedures I would need to complete for both the summer research program and the dependency override application. Mr. Martinez also provided contact information for 2 other administrators who could serve as additional references if needed. "Maya, I want you to understand something important," he said as our meeting concluded. "What's happening to you is not typical. Most students don't face this level of family opposition to educational opportunities, and most students don't have to fight this hard for the right to pursue their academic goals. You're handling an extraordinarily difficult situation with remarkable maturity and strategic thinking. His words provided reassurance that my approach was reasonable rather than rebellious, that I was responding appropriately to unusual circumstances rather than overreacting to normal family concerns about college attendance. The drive home that evening gave me time to rehearse the conversation I would need to have with my parents about the Harvard research opportunity. I decided to focus on the practical advantages first, emphasizing the financial benefits and academic preparation aspects before addressing the accelerated timeline. Our house looked exactly as it had that morning when I had left for school, but everything felt different now that I carried definitive plans for my immediate future. The Chen Electronics van in the driveway reminded me that my parents were building something important and valuable, even if their vision of my role in that enterprise didn't align with my own professional goals. Inside, I found my mother preparing dinner while my father reviewed paperwork at the kitchen table. Jason was apparently still at one of the stores handling the end-of-day inventory and cash reconciliation that required a family member's oversight. "How was school today, sweetheart?" my father asked, looking up from his financial reports. "Very productive," I replied, setting my backpack down and taking a seat at the table. "I received some important news about my college plans that I'd like to discuss with both of you." My mother turned from the stove to give me her full attention, her expression immediately shifting to wariness. Any conversation about college had become fraught with tension since the morning's letter destruction incident. "What kind of news?" she asked. "Harvard contacted my biology teacher to offer me a summer research position in their undergraduate science program. It's a 10-week program that includes housing, meal plan, and an $8,000 research stipend." Both of my parents stared at me in silence for several seconds, processing the information I had just delivered. I could see them trying to reconcile this news with their assumptions about elite universities and their accessibility to students from families like ours. $8,000? My father repeated. "For 10 weeks of research work with graduate students and faculty, studying health outcomes in immigrant communities. The experience would strengthen my medical school applications while providing practical research skills and financial independence. When would this program begin?" my mother asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer would complicate their summer plans. "June 15th, 3 days after graduation." The timeline information seemed to hit them both simultaneously. Their daughter would not be spending a leisurely summer at home, gradually preparing for college departure in August. Instead, she would be leaving Phoenix immediately after high school graduation for a research program that would establish her academic and financial independence within weeks rather than months. "That's very sudden," my father said carefully. "Don't you think you should take some time to consider such a significant commitment?" "I've been considering it all day, and I've discussed it extensively with my guidance counselor and biology teacher. This is exactly the kind of opportunity I hoped college would provide, except it's being offered even earlier than I expected." "What about spending time with family before you leave for college?" my mother asked. "What about the graduation party we were planning? What about having a chance to say proper goodbyes?" Her questions reflected the emotional reality that my accelerated departure would eliminate the gradual transition period they had probably been counting on to adjust to my leaving home. Instead of months to prepare for separation, they would have days. "We can still have a graduation party," I said, "and I'll be home for Christmas break, spring break, and probably several weeks during the following summer. This isn't permanent separation, but it changes everything," my mother said, her voice rising with stress. "How are we supposed to plan for your leaving if you keep changing the timeline and the arrangements?" "I'm not changing anything arbitrarily. I'm responding to opportunities as they arise. This research position is too valuable to decline just because the timing isn't perfectly convenient." My father had been quiet during this exchange, but I could see him working through the practical implications of what I was describing. As a businessman, he understood the value of opportunities that provided both experience and financial compensation. "Tell me more about the research project," he said. "What exactly would you be studying?" I explained Dr. Williams' description of the community health research, emphasizing the focus on immigrant communities and the potential applications to healthcare improvement. My father listened intently, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated he was taking the opportunity seriously rather than dismissing it outright. "The research experience would be directly relevant to medical school preparation," I concluded, "and the financial stipend would reduce the burden on our family resources during my undergraduate years." "What about living arrangements?" my mother asked. "Would you be supervised appropriately? Would you be safe in Boston without family support?" "The program includes housing in Harvard's residence halls with other research students. There are residential advisors, security systems, meal plans, and comprehensive student support services. The university takes responsibility for participant safety and welfare." We continued discussing practical details for another hour, with my parents asking increasingly specific questions about program structure, academic requirements, and long-term implications. Gradually, I could see them shifting from initial resistance toward cautious consideration of the opportunity's merits. "I need to research this program independently," my father announced finally. "I want to verify the details you've described and understand the full scope of what you're committing to." Of course, Dr. Williams encouraged questions from family members, and she's available to speak with parents by phone if you'd like to discuss the program directly. The offer seemed to surprise my mother, who had perhaps assumed that elite universities would be dismissive of parental concerns or unwilling to communicate with families from backgrounds like ours. "She would actually talk to us?" my mother asked. She specifically mentioned that family support was important for student success in the program. "Harvard wants participants to have strong relationships with their families, not strained relationships caused by poor communication." This information appeared to ease some of my mother's concerns about the cultural fit issues that had worried her since my college acceptances arrived. If Harvard actively encouraged family involvement, perhaps their fears about institutional snobbishness were unfounded. "We'll need to discuss this privately before making any decisions," my father said. "This is a significant change from our previous understanding of your college timeline." "I understand, but I need to respond to Harvard by Friday, so we'll need to reach a conclusion quickly." The deadline created urgency that would prevent extended deliberation, but also minimize opportunities for my parents to create new obstacles or conditions. Within 48 hours, we would need to make a definitive decision about my summer plans. That evening, as I completed homework and prepared for another day of navigating the complex dynamics around my educational future, I felt cautiously optimistic about the trajectory of my relationship with my parents. The Harvard research opportunity had provided concrete evidence that my college plans were not only viable but actively supported by faculty who recognized my academic potential. More importantly, it had shifted the conversation from theoretical concerns about elite education to practical discussions about specific opportunities and benefits. My parents could research Harvard's summer programs, speak with faculty coordinators, and verify the details I had described. They could make informed decisions based on facts rather than fears. The following morning brought an email from Dr. Williams containing the formal research position offer letter, program handbook, and acceptance forms. The documentation was thorough and professional, providing detailed information about every aspect of the summer experience from academic expectations to residence hall policies. I printed copies of everything and placed them in a folder for my parents to review, along with Dr. Williams' contact information and references to Harvard's official program website. If they wanted to verify the legitimacy and value of the opportunity, they would have all the resources necessary to conduct comprehensive research. By Thursday afternoon, my father had spent hours on the Harvard website, reading about their undergraduate research programs, faculty credentials, and student outcomes. He had also spoken with Dr. Williams by phone, asking detailed questions about program structure, supervision, and academic requirements. She was remarkably helpful and knowledgeable, he reported over dinner. She answered every question I asked and provided additional information about Harvard's support systems for first-generation college students. "What did you think of her assessment of Maya's research potential?" my mother asked. She used words like exceptional and graduate-level sophistication to describe Maya's science fair project. She said they rarely see undergraduate-level work that demonstrates such strong understanding of both research methodology and community health issues. Hearing these compliments secondhand from my father felt different from receiving them directly from Dr. Williams. His willingness to relay such positive feedback suggested he was beginning to accept that my academic achievements might indeed qualify me for opportunities at elite institutions. "Mom, what are your remaining concerns about the summer program?" I asked. "Primarily safety and social fit," she replied honestly. "I worry about you living so far from family support, and I worry about whether you'll be able to relate to other students from very different backgrounds." Dr. Williams mentioned that about 40% of the summer research students come from first-generation college families, I said. "The program specifically recruits students from diverse backgrounds because they bring valuable perspectives to community health research." This information seemed to surprise my mother, who had perhaps assumed that Harvard summer programs would be dominated by students from privileged backgrounds similar to those stereotypically associated with elite universities. She also mentioned that several previous participants have maintained strong family relationships throughout their college careers, my father added. "Distance doesn't necessarily weaken family bonds if everyone makes an effort to stay connected." The conversation continued for another hour, but the tone had shifted definitively from resistance to acceptance. My parents were no longer debating whether I should accept the research opportunity, but rather discussing how to prepare for my departure and maintain family relationships during my absence. Friday morning arrived with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness as I prepared to submit my acceptance of Harvard's summer research position. The decision felt momentous, not just because it confirmed my college plans but because it established my independence and demonstrated my family's ultimate support for my educational goals. At school, I completed the acceptance forms during lunch period, using Mr. Martinez's office for privacy and assistance with any final questions. The paperwork was straightforward, but signing my name felt like signing a commitment to a future that had seemed impossible just days earlier. Maya, I'm tremendously proud of how you've handled this situation, Mr. Martinez said as I finished the last form. You've shown remarkable resilience and maturity in pursuing your goals despite significant obstacles. I couldn't have done it without support from teachers like you and Mrs. Patterson, I replied. Having adults who believed in my potential made all the difference when my family was struggling to accept my choices. That's exactly what we're here for. And Maya, I hope you'll stay in touch during your college years. I'd love to hear about your experiences and achievements. Absolutely. I'll need recommendation letters for medical school applications in a few years, so you'll definitely be hearing from me. That afternoon, I submitted my research program acceptance to Dr. Williams and received immediate confirmation that my position was confirmed for the June program start date. Within minutes, additional emails arrived with housing assignments, meal plan information, and a reading list for preparation before the program began. The efficiency and professionalism of Harvard's communication systems impressed me and provided additional reassurance about the quality of support I could expect as a student. Every interaction had been prompt, helpful, and thoroughly organized. When I arrived home that evening, I found my parents waiting in the living room with serious expressions that initially made me worry they had reconsidered their support for my summer plans. Instead, they had prepared a family meeting to discuss logistics and expectations for my departure. We've decided to support your acceptance of the Harvard research position, my father announced. We believe it's an excellent opportunity that will benefit your long-term academic and career goals. Relief flooded through me as I absorbed this confirmation of their approval. Despite all my preparation for independence, having my parents' blessing felt important for both practical and emotional reasons. However, we have some conditions, my mother added. We want regular communication while you're in Boston, phone calls at least twice per week, and we want you to share details about your research work, your living situation, and your social experiences. I want to stay connected with family throughout the summer. We also want you to come home for a visit between the end of the research program and the start of fall semester, my father continued. Even if it's just for a few days, we'd like some time together before you begin regular undergraduate coursework. That sounds perfect. I'll need time to prepare for freshman year anyway. And finally, my mother said, her voice becoming more emotional, we want you to know that we're proud of what you've accomplished and excited about your future, even though we're sad about you leaving home. Her words brought tears to my eyes as I realized how far we had all traveled from the morning when she had destroyed my acceptance letters in a moment of panic and fear. The family dynamics that had seemed irreparably damaged just days earlier had not only healed, but had grown stronger through honest communication and mutual respect. I'm proud to be your daughter, I replied, and I'm grateful that we worked through our disagreements instead of letting them create permanent division. The weeks that followed passed quickly as I completed final high school requirements while preparing for immediate departure to Massachusetts. Graduation day arrived with a mixture of celebration and anticipation as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, knowing that my college education would begin in less than 72 hours. My family attended the ceremony in force, with my parents, Jason, and several extended family members cheering loudly when my name was called. The contrast with my earlier fears about family support was remarkable and deeply gratifying. At the graduation party my parents hosted that evening, I was surrounded by teachers, classmates, and family friends who had supported my academic journey throughout high school. Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Martinez both attended, along with several other faculty members who had provided encouragement and guidance during my college application process. Maya, we're all so excited to follow your progress at Harvard, Mrs. Rodriguez said during the party. You've inspired several of our current juniors to consider applying to elite universities themselves. The most important thing I learned is that opportunities exist for students who work hard and persist through obstacles, I replied. Background and family income don't disqualify you from elite education if you're willing to advocate for yourself and seek out resources. 2 days later, as my parents drove me to Sky Harbor Airport for my flight to Boston, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred in our family relationships over the past month. What had begun as devastating betrayal had evolved into deeper understanding and stronger mutual respect. Call us when you land in Boston, my mother instructed as we reached the departure area, and call us again after you get settled in your residence hall. I will. And thank you for researching the program so thoroughly and supporting my decision to accept the opportunity. Thank you for being patient with us while we learn to trust your judgment, my father replied. We're still learning how to be parents of an adult daughter. We're all learning, I agreed, but we're learning together, which is what matters most. As my plane lifted off from Phoenix, I looked down at the desert landscape that had shaped my first 18 years of life. The city spread toward the mountains in familiar patterns of neighborhoods, shopping centers, and business districts where my family had built their American dream. In a few hours, I would land in Boston and begin a summer research program that would accelerate my preparation for medical school while establishing my independence as a young adult. But I was carrying with me everything valuable from my Arizona childhood: work ethic, integrity, resilience, and the hard-won knowledge that family love can survive honest disagreement and emerge stronger through the process. 10 weeks later, as I presented my research findings to Harvard faculty and fellow students, I understood that my mother's attempt to destroy my college letters had actually set in motion a series of events that led to opportunities beyond anything I had originally imagined. Her moment of panic had forced me to develop advocacy skills, independence, and determination that would serve me well throughout my medical career. The research I conducted that summer on health disparities in immigrant communities became the foundation for my undergraduate thesis, my medical school personal statement, and eventually my specialty choice in family medicine, with a focus on serving diverse populations. Every aspect of my academic and professional development connected back to that spring morning when my future had seemed to disappear into a garbage disposal. Years later, as I established my medical practice in a Phoenix neighborhood with a large population of immigrant families, I would often think about the morning that taught me dreams worth pursuing are resilient enough to survive temporary setbacks and creative enough to find alternative paths to fulfillment. My patients benefited not just from my Harvard education, but from my understanding of family dynamics, cultural pressures, and the courage required to pursue goals that others might not understand or support. The obstacles my parents had initially placed in my path had ultimately strengthened my ability to help other families navigate conflicts between tradition and opportunity, between safety and growth, between love and fear. The morning sun filtered through the dormitory windows of Harvard's Weld Hall as I prepared for what would be the most significant presentation of my young academic career. 10 weeks of intensive research had culminated in this moment, where I would present findings that could potentially influence healthcare policy for immigrant communities across Massachusetts. The irony wasn't lost on me that the daughter whose college letters had been destroyed in a kitchen garbage disposal was now preparing to address some of the most distinguished medical researchers in the country. My research partner, a graduate student named Alex from Columbia, knocked on my door at exactly 7:30. We had developed a comfortable working relationship over the summer, bonding over our shared experience of navigating elite academic environments while maintaining connections to immigrant families who didn't always understand the opportunities we were pursuing. "Ready for this, Maya?" Alex asked as I gathered my presentation materials and laptop. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, though my stomach was churning with nervous excitement. Dr. Williams said the audience will include faculty from both the medical school and the public health school, plus administrators from several Boston area hospitals. "Your findings about healthcare access barriers are going to change how they think about serving immigrant populations," Alex said confidently. "The correlation you identified between language services and health outcomes is exactly what policymakers need to see." The research I had conducted over the summer had evolved far beyond my original expectations. What began as a straightforward analysis of health disparities had uncovered systematic patterns of healthcare access barriers that were preventable through relatively simple policy interventions. My recommendations had the potential to improve health outcomes for thousands of immigrant families, while reducing overall healthcare costs for institutions serving diverse populations. Walking across Harvard Yard toward the presentation venue, I thought about how dramatically my life had changed since that devastating morning in March, when my mother had systematically destroyed every college acceptance letter I had received. The path from that moment of despair to this moment of opportunity had been neither straight nor predictable, but it had taught me lessons about resilience and determination that no classroom could have provided. The presentation venue was Harvard's prestigious Longwood Medical Area, where the university's medical and public health schools collaborated on research that influenced healthcare policy nationwide. Standing in the lecture hall where I would soon present my findings, I felt the weight of representing not just my own academic achievements, but also the potential contributions of first-generation college students who might otherwise never have access to such platforms. Williams introduced me to the assembled audience with words that still seemed surreal when applied to my work. "Maya Chen's research this summer has demonstrated the kind of analytical sophistication and social awareness that we hope to cultivate in all our students. Her findings about language services and health outcomes represent exactly the kind of community-engaged scholarship that Harvard is committed to supporting." As I began my presentation explaining the methodology I had used to analyze health data from Boston's immigrant communities, I could see audience members taking notes and nodding with recognition. These were professionals who worked daily with the populations I had studied, and they understood immediately the practical implications of my research findings.
But data reveals that hospitals providing comprehensive language services see significantly better health outcomes for immigrant patients, including higher rates of preventive care utilization, better medication compliance, and fewer emergency department visits for conditions that could be managed through primary care, I explained, clicking through slides that displayed charts and graphs representing months of careful analysis. More importantly, the cost-benefit analysis demonstrates that investing in language services actually reduces overall healthcare costs by preventing more expensive emergency interventions and improving early detection of chronic conditions. The questions that followed my presentation were sophisticated and engaged, treating me as a serious researcher rather than a summer student presenting preliminary work. Faculty members asked about statistical methodology, policy implementation challenges, and potential applications to other immigrant communities beyond Boston. Ms. Chen, have you considered submitting this research for publication in a peer-reviewed public health journal? Asked Dr. Margaret Foster, a professor from the Harvard School of Public Health. Your findings would be valuable for healthcare administrators across the country who are developing language access policies. The suggestion that my undergraduate research might be worthy of professional publication was overwhelming. When I had begun the summer program, my goals had been focused simply on gaining research experience and preparing for medical school applications. The possibility that my work might contribute to actual policy change had never occurred to me. I would be very interested in pursuing publication, I replied, though I would need guidance about the process and requirements for academic journals. Dr. Williams and I would be happy to mentor you through the publication process, Dr. Foster continued. We could also explore opportunities for you to present
these findings at national conferences during your undergraduate years. After the presentation concluded, I found myself surrounded by faculty members, hospital administrators, and graduate students who wanted to discuss my research in more detail. Several offered contact information for future collaboration, and 2 professors mentioned potential research opportunities for the following summer. Maya, you should be incredibly proud of what you've accomplished this summer, Dr. Williams said as the crowd gradually dispersed. Your research has generated more interest and discussion than any undergraduate project I've supervised in the past 5 years. Thank you for taking a chance on me, I replied. When you first called Desert Ridge High School, I never imagined the summer would lead to opportunities like this. The opportunities exist because you have the talent and dedication to deserve them, but I want you to understand that this is just the beginning. The connections you've made today, the skills you've developed, and the credibility you've established will continue opening doors throughout your undergraduate years and beyond. That evening, as I packed my belongings in preparation for returning to Phoenix for a brief visit before freshman year began, I reflected on the transformation that had occurred over the course of 10 weeks. The insecure high school senior who had arrived in Boston in June had evolved into a confident young researcher whose work was being discussed by medical professionals and policy experts. The financial independence I had gained through the research stipend felt almost secondary to the intellectual confidence that came from proving I could contribute meaningfully to academic discussions at the highest levels. My mother's fears about my inability to succeed in an elite environment had been definitively disproven, not through wishful thinking but through concrete achievement and recognition. The flight back to Phoenix gave me time to process everything that had happened and prepare for conversations with my family about my summer experiences. I knew they would be curious about the research I had conducted, the people I had met, and the ways the program had influenced my academic and career goals. More importantly, I needed to help them understand that my success at Harvard had not diminished my connection to Phoenix or my appreciation for the values they had instilled in me. If anything, the summer had reinforced my commitment to using my education in service of communities like the one where I had grown up. Sky Harbor Airport looked exactly as it had when I had departed 10 weeks earlier, but I felt like a different person returning to familiar surroundings. The Arizona heat was oppressive after a summer in New England, but it was also comforting in its predictability and warmth. My entire family was waiting at the baggage claim area, holding a handmade welcome home sign that my mother had obviously spent considerable time creating. The sight of them standing together, clearly excited about my return, brought tears to my eyes as I realized how much I had missed them despite the incredible opportunities I had been pursuing. Maya, My mother called out, rushing forward to embrace me before I had even retrieved my luggage. "You look so grown up. Tell us everything about your summer." "There's a lot to tell," I replied, hugging each family member in turn, "but first I want to hear about everything that happened here while I was gone." The drive home was filled with overlapping conversations as everyone tried to share their news simultaneously. Jason had successfully implemented a new customer service training program across all Chen Electronics locations, resulting in measurably improved customer satisfaction scores. My father had been selected to serve on a Phoenix Business Development Committee focused on supporting minority-owned enterprises. My mother had spent the summer taking a community college course in digital marketing, preparing to help modernize the family business's online presence. Each family member had used my absence as an opportunity for personal growth and professional development, which made me feel proud rather than guilty about pursuing my own educational goals. "We have something to show you," my father announced as we pulled into our driveway. "We've been working on a surprise project." Inside the house, I discovered that my parents had converted our spare bedroom into a home office space specifically designed for my use during school breaks. The room included a desk, computer, printer, and bookshelf, along with a comfortable chair and good lighting for studying. "We wanted you to have a dedicated space for your academic work when you're home," my mother explained. "We know you'll need to maintain your studies even during breaks, and we wanted to make sure you have everything you need." The gesture was deeply touching, representing a complete reversal from their earlier opposition to my college plans. Instead of trying to make my academic pursuits more difficult, they had actively created an environment to support my educational success. "This is incredible," I said, running my hands along the desk surface and testing the chair height. "You've thought of everything." "We've had 10 weeks to think about how to support your goals," my father said. "We wanted to demonstrate that we're committed to your success, even when it takes you far from home." That evening, as we sat around the dinner table sharing stories from our respective summers, I found myself describing my research project and the positive reception it had received from Harvard faculty. My family listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about methodology, findings, and implications. "So your research could actually influence how hospitals treat immigrant families?" Jason asked. "That's the hope. The data shows that relatively simple policy changes could improve health outcomes while reducing costs. If hospitals implement these recommendations, patients like us would receive better care and feel more comfortable seeking medical attention when they need it." "That's exactly the kind of impact your education should have," my father said with obvious pride, "using your knowledge and opportunities to help communities that have been underserved. It's also proof that your background is an advantage in your academic work, not a disadvantage," my mother added. "You understand these communities because you come from one of them." The conversation continued late into the evening, with my family expressing genuine interest in my research findings and future academic plans. The contrast with our earlier conflicts about college attendance was remarkable, demonstrating how experiences and understanding could evolve when people remained open to new information and perspectives. Over the following days, I had individual conversations with each family member about their own growth during my absence. My mother had not only taken the digital marketing course but had also joined a support group for parents of college-bound students, where she had met other families navigating similar transitions. I learned that many immigrant parents struggle with the balance between wanting their children to succeed and fearing that success will take them away permanently, she told me during one of our walks around the neighborhood. Talking with other mothers helped me understand that education doesn't have to mean abandonment. Jason had used the summer to research business school programs, discovering that his own academic goals might eventually include graduate education. My success in pursuing elite opportunities had apparently inspired him to consider expanding his own educational horizons. "I'm thinking about applying to MBA programs in a few years," he confided. "Maybe at ASU initially, but possibly other schools if my grades and test scores are competitive enough." "That's fantastic," I replied. Business school would give you tools to expand Chen electronics in ways that might not be possible with just undergraduate preparation. I've been thinking about your Harvard connections too, he continued. Maybe someday there could be opportunities for collaboration between the medical field and retail business, especially around employee health and wellness programs. His willingness to view my academic path as potentially beneficial to our family business represented a significant shift from his earlier dismissive attitude toward my educational goals. Instead of seeing my success as threatening to his position, he had begun to recognize ways that diverse expertise could strengthen our collective opportunities. My father had spent the summer researching Harvard's alumni network and business connections, discovering that many graduates returned to serve their home communities with enhanced skills and resources. His business-minded approach to understanding my college choice had led him to appreciate the long-term strategic value of my education. I've been reading about Harvard Medical School graduates who have started community health centers, developed innovative healthcare delivery models, and influenced policy at state and national levels, he told me. I'm beginning to understand that elite education can amplify impact rather than diminish connection to community. As my brief visit home drew to a close and I prepared to return to Massachusetts for freshman orientation, I felt that my relationship with my family had not only healed but had grown stronger through the challenges we had navigated together. The conflict over my college plans had forced all of us to examine our assumptions, communicate more honestly, and develop deeper respect for each other's perspectives. I'm proud of how we've all handled this transition, I told my parents on my last evening home. I know it wasn't easy for you to watch me leave for opportunities that felt unfamiliar and potentially risky. We're proud of how you pursued your goals while maintaining respect for family relationships, my mother replied. You could have simply rebelled and cut us off when we opposed your plans. Instead, you worked to help us understand why your education was important. The most important thing I learned is that love doesn't require limiting each other's potential, my father added. Supporting your dreams turned out to be more rewarding than trying to control them. The return flight to Boston felt different from my first journey to Harvard 3 months earlier. Instead of nervous excitement about an unknown future, I felt confident anticipation about continuing the academic journey I had already begun. The research experience had proven that I belonged in this environment and could contribute meaningfully to intellectual discussions at the highest levels. Freshman orientation week was a whirlwind of academic planning, social events, and administrative procedures. Meeting my freshman classmates, I was struck by the diversity of backgrounds and experiences represented in my entering class. The stereotypes about Harvard students that had worried my parents were largely inaccurate. My classmates came from small towns and major cities, public schools and private schools, wealthy families and working-class families. What we shared was intellectual curiosity, academic dedication, and the desire to use our education to make positive contributions to society. These common values created immediate connections despite our different backgrounds and life experiences. My freshman dormitory room was in Holworthy Hall, one of Harvard's historic residence halls, located directly on Harvard Yard. My roommate was Sarah, a first-generation college student from rural Maine whose parents were dairy farmers. Like me, she had faced family skepticism about attending an elite university far from home. My parents were convinced I'd come home for Christmas talking with a Boston accent and looking down on farm life, Sarah told me, as we arranged our belongings in our shared space. It took most of the summer for them to accept that I could get a Harvard education and still be the same person who grew up milking cows and helping with hay harvests. My family worried that I'd lose my connection to immigrant communities and become someone who forgot where she came from, I replied. But the summer research program actually strengthened my commitment to serving underserved populations. Our conversation continued as we walked to our first freshman advising meeting, where we would plan our course schedules and discuss academic goals with faculty advisors. The freedom to choose classes that aligned with my interests and career objectives felt almost overwhelming after 4 years of following predetermined high school requirements.
My academic advisor was Dr. Jennifer Santos, a professor in Harvard's Department of Social Medicine, who had reviewed my summer research and was enthusiastic about helping me plan a course of study that would prepare me for medical school while allowing continued research in community health. Maya, your summer work demonstrates exactly the kind of engaged scholarship that medical schools value most highly, Dr. Santos explained during our advising meeting. You've shown that you can conduct rigorous research while maintaining focus on practical applications that benefit underserved communities. I want to continue developing research skills while completing pre-medical requirements, I replied. I'm particularly interested in courses that combine scientific training with understanding of social determinants of health. I'd recommend starting with our Introduction to Global Health course, which examines how social, economic, and political factors influence health outcomes across different populations. You should also consider our Research Methods in Social Sciences course, which would build on the statistical skills you developed over the summer. We spent the next hour planning a 4-year course sequence that would fulfill medical school prerequisites while allowing me to pursue advanced research opportunities and develop expertise in community health. The flexibility of Harvard's curriculum meant that I could design an academic program specifically aligned with my career goals and intellectual interests. My first semester courses included organic chemistry, calculus, Introduction to Global Health, Spanish for healthcare providers, and a freshman seminar on healthcare policy and ethics. The combination of rigorous science courses with policy and language studies reflected my intention to become a physician who could serve diverse communities effectively. The academic workload was challenging but manageable, especially after the intensive research experience I had completed over the summer. More importantly, I found myself genuinely excited about every course I was taking, engaged with material that connected directly to my long-term career aspirations. My professors were supportive and accessible, treating freshman students as serious scholars rather than children who needed excessive guidance. The intellectual freedom to explore complex topics and develop independent thinking skills was exactly what I had hoped college education would provide. Outside of academics, I joined Harvard's Pre-Medical Society, the Public Health Student Association, and a volunteer program that provided health education in Boston's immigrant communities. Each activity reinforced my commitment to using medical training in service of populations that face significant healthcare access barriers. The volunteer work was particularly meaningful because it allowed me to apply skills I had developed through my summer research while building relationships with community members whose experiences resembled those of my own family. Working with recent immigrants who struggled to navigate the American healthcare system reminded me daily of why I had chosen to pursue medical education despite the obstacles I had faced. By mid-October, I had established a comfortable routine of academic work, research activities, and community service that felt both challenging and sustainable. My grades were strong, my research projects were progressing well, and I had developed friendships with classmates who shared my commitment to using education for social good. Regular phone calls with my family revealed that they were adjusting well to my absence and taking pride in my academic achievements. My mother had begun volunteering with a local organization that helped immigrant families navigate healthcare and education systems, applying lessons she had learned from my experiences to help other parents support their children's goals. I want other families to avoid the mistakes we made, she told me during one of our weekly phone conversations. I want them to understand that supporting their children's education doesn't mean losing them to unfamiliar worlds. Jason had begun taking evening classes in business management and accounting, preparing for greater responsibilities in the family electronics business. His academic pursuits had given him new appreciation for the dedication required to succeed in challenging coursework. I never understood how much work you put into your studies, he admitted. Taking college courses while working full-time has given me respect for what you accomplished in high school. My father had been invited to speak at several local business organizations about supporting children's educational aspirations while maintaining strong family relationships. His perspective as an immigrant parent who had initially resisted his daughter's college plans but ultimately became supportive had resonated with other families facing similar decisions. As freshman year progressed, I began planning for the following summer, exploring research opportunities that would build on the work I had begun as a high school graduate. Williams had recommended me for a competitive research fellowship that would allow me to continue studying healthcare access issues while developing grant writing skills and policy analysis expertise. The fellowship application process required letters of recommendation, a research proposal, and interviews with faculty committees. The skills I had developed in advocating for my college opportunities served me well in presenting my qualifications and articulating my research interests to evaluate committee. When I received notification that I had been awarded the fellowship, along with a research stipend that would again provide financial independence for the summer, I felt that my academic trajectory was accelerating beyond anything I had originally envisioned. Each opportunity was leading to additional opportunities, creating momentum that would carry me through undergraduate years and into medical school. The call I made to my family to share this news was filled with celebration and pride. My parents expressed genuine excitement about my continued success, asking detailed questions about the research I would be conducting and the skills I would be developing. "We're so proud of how you've taken advantage of every opportunity Harvard has offered," my mother said. "You've proven that our investment in your education was the right decision." "Our investment," I repeated, puzzled by her phrasing. "Our decision to trust your judgment and support your goals," she clarified. "It was an investment in your potential and in our family's future. We're seeing excellent returns on that investment." Her business-minded way of describing their support made me smile, but it also reflected how completely their perspective had shifted since the morning when college acceptance letters had seemed like threats to family stability rather than opportunities for family advancement. As freshman year drew to a close, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred in my life since that devastating March morning when my mother had destroyed my Harvard acceptance letter. The path from that moment of despair to my current academic success had been neither straight nor predictable, but it had taught me lessons about resilience, determination, and family relationships that would influence every aspect of my future career. The research I was conducting, the courses I was taking, and the community connections I was building all pointed toward a medical career focused on serving immigrant and underserved populations. My mother's attempt to prevent my departure from Phoenix had ultimately strengthened my commitment to returning home as a physician better prepared to address the healthcare needs of communities like the one where I had grown up. Most importantly, the family conflict that had initially seemed devastating had ultimately strengthened our relationships by forcing honest communication about fears, expectations, and values. My parents' journey from opposition to support had demonstrated that love could evolve to accommodate growth rather than requiring limitation. As I prepared for sophomore year, I carried with me the confidence that came from proving I belonged in this academic environment, the skills I had developed through research and coursework, and the unwavering support of a family that had learned to celebrate my achievements rather than fear them. The morning my mother had thrown away my acceptance letters, she had thought she was protecting our family from dissolution and me from abandonment by an institution that would never truly accept someone like me. Instead, she had set in motion a series of events that proved both fears groundless and demonstrated that dreams pursued with determination and supported by love could exceed even the most optimistic expectations. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.